as you all know, is one of the most dramatic trends of the 20th century and also the 21st century, and it has made us, forced us to come to terms with what it means for international development, and also how we can shape it and use it to our advantage. But as you also know, I find this really difficult to do myself. As you also know, a lot of countries have and continue to have problems tackling the housing crisis. It continues to be a wicked issue. Even though fertility rates in many parts of the world are falling, they're not falling fast enough, and that means that we have increasing population growth in addition to high levels of poverty, which means that many governments are really struggling to meet their housing needs. Then we also have the other extreme, where we have regions within countries that are dominated by an oversupply of unaffordable housing, either because it is really unaffordable, or because, as we also heard from the example in Dublin, that people are holding on to it for speculative reasons, which obviously points to the fact that there's a lack of government regulation, and it also points to the fact that we are dealing with increasing urban inequality. So whether we are talking about slums or gated communities, urban sprawl, overcrowding, homelessness, or vacant houses, I think we can all agree that the way we produce and consume housing very much shapes our cities, and it is very much dependent on whether we can tackle this housing crisis in order to really benefit from the positive yields of urbanization. I think we can kind of draw the conclusion that the enabling approach, which was reinforced about 20 years ago again with Habitat 2, really has fallen short of providing enough adequate housing and affordable housing. Many governments have backed away from direct supply, and also not enough has been done by many governments to really encourage other actors to step in and provide adequate housing in the quantity we need and at the scale we need. So we believe this growing urgency really presents us with a very opportune moment to reposition housing in the center of the development agenda. Reposition because it once has been there, then it kind of left, and the moment for this is really right, for instance, with the adoption recently, about a couple of months ago, of the Sustainable Development Goals. If anybody has been familiar with this, especially SDG 11 on cities, the first ever development goal on cities specifically, and then also the Habitat 3 conference. Now, I'm sure not everybody might be aware of this conference. It is third in a series. The first was held in 1976 in Vancouver, the second one in 96 in Istanbul, and the next one is going to be next October in Quito, Ecuador. And the Habitat Conference are the United Nations conferences on housing and sustainable urban development. So this is where everybody gets together and drafts an overarching framework document, which in 1996 was called the Urban Agenda, and in Quito is going to be called the New Urban Agenda. Very, very good kind of branding there. So the defined objectives of the conference next year are, and this is straight from the official material, are to secure renewed political commitments for sustainable urban development, to assess accomplishments to date, to address poverty and identify and address new and emerging challenges. And we would like to add to this list to redefine the role of housing. Now, the vehicle or the mantra which we have chosen in order to do that is the housing at the center approach. So what it is basically a paradigm shift in housing policy, urban planning and international discourse, and it operates on two levels. So on a national level, it really tries to drive home the point to governments that housing policy needs to be better integrated into national urban policies. but also on a city level. Spatially, we want to re-establish the fact that housing needs to be at the center of our cities. Then the key tenets of this are a strengthened role of government through strong institutions, policy and regulatory frameworks, which means that the inputs needed for housing delivery, like land, infrastructure and finance, are affordable. Then also we need national and local authorities to be at the helm of policy, design and implementation, which obviously needs a lot of political support from all levels of government and between different tiers of government. And this also means going beyond simply providing the enabling framework for infrastructure, land and finance, and also to directly intervene in these areas. So this may be very outlandish or a very obvious thing to propose, but in many countries it is a radical departure from what's been the modus operandi over the last 2-3 decades. So the basic principles of the approach on a national level, these are sort of the beacons which we would like governments to be aware of when designing housing policies and other policies on a national level, just to be aware of the importance of housing. That housing is inseparable from urbanization, meaning that whenever economic and social policies are designed, housing needs to be considered and responded to and also made use of. Then secondly, housing is a socio-economic development imperative, which means, as you all know, housing is a very strong support for family survival. It provides livelihoods and it's an important input into the wealth and welfare of people. Thirdly, we need systemic reforms, strong states and long-term policy and finance in order to provide adequate housing for all. We're also, fourthly, promoting a twin-track approach of curative measures and preventative measures. Curative would be something like slum upgrading, and preventative and direct supply of new housing. And the last point is really trying to drive home the importance of human rights-based principles and standards to make sure that the root causes underlying the fact that many people are prevented from access to adequate housing, like discrimination based on race, age, disability, gender, income, or geography, are really addressed. So this sounds all very abstract, so I'm trying to give some practical examples on how we at Habitat are trying to operationalize it and make it concrete. So I've identified 3 possible pathways for application. The first one would be the direct engagement we have with countries. So governments approach us for guidance on designing the housing policies. So one of the vehicles we have for doing that is the so-called global housing strategy, which is a 3-track or 3-step approach when engaging with governments. So the first one is we do a so-called housing sector assessment, which is a document which analyzes everything within the housing sector, all the stakeholders, all the bottlenecks, and it provides governments with an idea of where policy reform should go. And then in the second step, we are do an action plan and a roadmap for implementation of housing policy reform. And in the third step, we actually go down to program design, depending on the needs and priorities that were identified for that particular country. Because obviously, conditions between countries vary hugely, and you cannot take a cookie-cutter approach. The second one is our own programming. So when we develop projects, we really drive home the point with our other branches. So Habitat is split up into several branches that are thematically organized to consider housing and see how the project might impact on housing in the area they're operating in, and also how the project might improve the housing situation. 3 minutes. Then, then we have two programs called Planned City Extensions and Planned City Infills, which are basically also looking at the fact where housing is located. I would like to talk more about that, but I can't. So and then we also have the dialogue with our Habitat Agenda Pathways. So we have a global platform called the World Urban Campaign. I encourage you to look into that. And then the last pathway is, it is really cursed. Start from here. Okay, perfect. So the Habitat 3 process, as you all know, Habitat 3 is going to happen next year. There was a highly consultative participatory process over the last year. The first one was the writing of so-called issue papers, which are documents that you can all find online. They're basically stock-taking exercises of past challenges or past successes, and we were in charge of writing issue paper number 20 of 22 issue papers in total. These issue papers are going to influence the final drafting of the document. One step in between will be the policy units, which are 10 units of 20 experts in their respective fields who are going to come up with independent policy recommendations. And then finally in May 2016 we're hoping to have a zero draft of the Nairobi agenda. So what we're expecting from it, I mentioned this, an increased awareness and commitment of governments and global actors, strengthen government engagement and intervention, a renewed cycle of support and investment. We would like to see the re-emergence of some of the housing programs that international development agencies, for instance, used to have in the past. For instance, the Housing Guarantee Program by USAID, which ran from 61 until 94 when the Republicans scrapped it. And the overall goal obviously is the significant and measurable improvement of housing and living conditions for all. So lastly, very quickly, an initiative by UN Habitat, which is very similar to what OIKONET has achieved and is doing. So it's basically an initiative that tries to answer the question of how can universities be better partners for cities, what the next generation of urban practitioners should know. So there, I'm going to skip this. It's formulated around these areas. We currently have about 100 individual members, 180 institutions affiliated with the network. There's a website which you can peruse at your own time. I recommend it, and this is the main point. I want to bring this up. So it's organized around thematic hubs, and as you can see, a big hub that is currently missing is one on housing. There's an application that works with the University of Sao Paulo to lead one of the to be a thematic hub on housing. And if you'd like to know more about how you'd like to get involved in that, I can link you up with my colleague who's leading the initiative on this. And I believe there was some initial discussion as well on how to lead OIKONET with this, so I'm trying to do that here. Finally, there's also the Global Urban Lecture Series, an outcome of this network. There's a YouTube channel with some lectures on urban issues by various international academic experts. There is also a trailer which I'm going to not have time for, and that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of questions. Just to allow universities to get involved in human habitat projects in the field, to allow allow students to try some of their ideas out or suggest ideas for project solutions. Then also it has a knowledge management platform, so research results are shared through the website so that other universities can gain access to it. And then obviously, if we are very affiliated with a certain urban expert, then we also invite them to record video for the urban lecture series. So all of this is part of the network. It's not an initiative that I'm leading personally, but I'd be happy to link you with my colleague Lydia Blades, who's in charge of this. And yeah, I think the housing angle is definitely one that is missing from this network at the moment. Yes.
Can I just say that some of your tenets and basic principles are scandalously obvious.
Yes.
And well done, and I just wish you had been in power in Ireland at the start of the Celtic Tiger years. Can I ask you, how do you think how do you think governments are going to take you? Are they going to take you seriously? How are you going to make inroads with the people who have the power?
That's a really good question. Obviously, it all starts with the language. We're always using the example of, say, mainstreaming human rights. It's something that people always think, oh yeah, it's important, but how do we actually make it concrete? And the way to do it within our own organization is really first to get the language in there, so that people start to get acclimatized to it, and then actions will eventually follow, and people can see the positive outcomes of it. This is obviously a first initiative, a first step. So this is our attempt basically at formulating for ourselves and for the immediate habitat agenda partners of what we actually would want to see, where do we want housing to go, and then the next step now would be to sit down with governments and sit down with other agencies to find out how can we make it concrete. I wish I would have a more satisfying answer for this at the moment, but what we've realized is basically that housing used to have a much stronger role, both in our own programming, but also on the government level. Habitat used to have a program called the Slum Upgrading Facility, also one called HERSO, which were basically active credit financing mechanisms for housing, and we don't have that anymore. And similarly, USAID used to have a very large housing guarantee program, and they don't have it anymore either. So we basically saw the strategic opportunity now with everybody getting together in Quito next year to really drive home the point that we need to take a more active role in housing supply.
Last year, the theme was slum as phenomena. So we tried to somehow put a brief research with our students within our workspace habitat regeneration strategy. So can you give a brief comment, because this is your expertise, the slum issues, and please comment this year's theme, which is the public space, I think.
Okay. Habitat is a very big organization, so I'm actually not in charge of the World Habitat Day, but I know last year was Voices from the Street. I think that was the theme, right? And your question is?